G'day guys, welcome back to Wheelwork. Trust you're doing well as always. You know the drill by now. Hope you're all doing well. Just wanted to show you guys today another vehicle that has joined the sort of the fleet, if you will, of vehicles. It's a car that I have bought through the business to be a courtesy car for customers, but I just need to go through and fix up a few things on it and service and stuff like that. And I'm going to do a couple of little basic, very basic mods to it, mods that cost nothing or next to nothing. And that is this car right here. So I'll go through and show you what it is and how I obtained it and what we're going to be doing to it. This is it, guys. This is a 2013 Hyundai i30. It's a SLX, which I think is a top of the line. So it's got like alloys and fog lights and a few other bits and pieces. It's a turbo diesel and it's an auto. So I'm basically bought this car off a customer and I'm going to be using it as a courtesy car for the business. Been looking for a courtesy car for a while. Have given out my Commodore wagon a couple of times, which I haven't really liked doing. This car did belong to a customer of mine. I did do a service on this car way back. When was it? Looking at the service sticker there, 6th of April 2021. The car has done 211,000 Ks. So in the last 2.5 years, it's only done 11,000 Ks. So it is overdue for a service, very much so on time, but only 1,000 Ks over by Ks. I did have a check over this car because I had a couple of concerns with knocks and noises that were coming from the car. I do know it's got a buggered steering rack end on the right-hand front there. So when that wheel's off the ground, you can move the wheel left and right and it sort of knocks around. Also, the back brakes are pretty well finished. They're almost on metal. The last time I worked on this car is when I did a service on it 2.5 years ago, or over 2.5 years ago. And I did an all-in-all filter change and an air filter on it, and that was it. So basically, we're going to get it on the hoist, start going over a few things. I want to check over, see what it needs service-wise. And then, sort of just go from there. So, we'll get it on the hoist and see where it's at and start getting into some of the work that it needs. Right, that's replaced and all works as it should. Stays up now, which is fantastic. Also replaced the little globe in here as it was blown. And when you open the little mirror flap, that just turns that little light on. So done that. So now we'll get it on the hoist. All right, so I've gone through and given this thing a full check over, sort of what it needs service-wise. Pull the air filter out. I did end up putting it back in, but I need to take all of this off now. But air filter's fine. I'm going to put a diesel fuel filter in it though, which is buried down there. So I need to take the engine cover off and the airbox and intake off to do that. I've changed the cabin filter behind the glove box. You've seen me do that in previous videos, so didn't bother showing you that. And I've put some new wipers on it. So I've also done a coolant change on it. So just drained and refilled the cooling system with new coolant. And I also need to do the brake fluid, but I'm not going to do that because I've ordered some brake pads for the rear. So I'll do that at the same time. I'll just go through and do the fuel filter now. Also needs an all-in-all filter for it, but I don't have an oil filter. I do have a fuel filter for it, but not an oil filter. And it also needs a transmission service quite badly. So transmission oil on this thing is fairly dirty. Well, it's not super bad, but it's not super great either. So we'll go through and give it a transmission service. I've got a transmission filter there for it as well. But we'll start with the fuel filter. We'll do that, and then I actually think we might get on to doing the steering rack end after that. Cool, so I got the engine cover off and the intake off. Engine cover's just sitting there. I took the lower tray off underneath as well. There's the airbox and the intake. There's the air filter. So, as I said, that didn't look too bad, so we'll reuse that. But we are going to do the fuel filter. So we just got a few bolts that hold this bracket to the firewall. And then there's just a few hoses and connections and electrical connectors and stuff like that we've got to remove to get this whole unit out, and then we'll change the filter on the bench. The filter assembly out. So all I want to do now is remove the bottom insert to drain the diesel fuel out of that filter. Then there's 2 bolts on the top that separate the filter and plunger out of the bracket, and then we can spin the old fuel filter off, spin the new one on, and then refit it to the car and bleed the diesel out of it, which I'll show you how to do once I get it back on the filter on the housing. There's the old filter there, just chilling. So new Ryco filter. So I'll go through and put the bracket back on, put that all reassembled, get it back in the car and bleed up the diesel. All right, so I've got the fuel filter back on. This is the fuel feed line from the tank, and this is the one that goes to the motor. So when you put it all back on, you want to go ahead and connect everything except the fuel line that goes to the motor. You've got a plunger on top of the filter housing here. What you need to do is, with this line off, you need to pump that plunger until diesel starts coming out of this fitting. So I normally just put like a little container underneath here to catch any diesel. But what that does is it fills up the fuel filter and gets any air out of the system. Then once diesel starts coming out of here, I reconnect this line and pump this plunger up again until it goes hard, just to make sure it's pressurized and ready to go. Once you do that, you can put the airbox and everything back on and start the car and make sure it's all good. So diesels, you have to get all the air out of the system first before you start the car. All right, continuing on with servicey things, I'm going to sort of do two things at once. I'm going to do the transmission service, but while the oil's draining, I'm going to start pulling apart this tie rod and this rack end to change that rack end. So I'm sort of going to bounce between them at the same time. What I'm actually going to do with the auto is I'm going to drain it and then I'm going to fill it up with fresh fluid. And then I'll drop the car down, start it up, run it through the gears, and then I'll lift it back up again. I'll drain the fluid again, and then I'll pull the pan off and do the filter, just to give it a bit of a clean out. With the the rack end. So you've got to undo that split pin up in there and take that nut off. Then you just sort of bang on the end of the knuckle there to drop the tie rod end out. You crack this lock nut here for the tie rod end, and then the tie rod end will wind off the rack end. I always count how many turns this comes off, so you can put the new one on the same way or similar amount of turns. But because we are changing the rack end as well, I will take this thing down the street this afternoon to get a wheel alignment done as well. So I've also ordered a tie rod end just for good measure. The boot on it is starting to crack a bit. So I figured while I've got it off, I'll just change it. So we're going to do a rack end and a tie rod end on this side. Just have a bit of a look at the color of the transmission, all that comes out of this. So yeah, she is not great at all. I might even end up filling it and draining it a couple of times before I pull the pan off, just to try and get it as clean as I can. You can even see on my fingers there, it's quite rank. All right, so I've just filled the transmission for the first time and run it through the gears, and now I'm dumping it again. So as you can see, there is a bit of redness in there now, but I am going to, after this drains, fill it one more time, run it through the gears again, and then I will dump the fluid one last time before I pull the pan off and do the filter. As for the steering rack, so I've got the tie rod end off. I've also removed just the little cable ties that hold the steering rack boot on. There's one on the outer and one on the inner. So that boot now will just slide off, and then we can go about removing the actual rack end. Okay, little update, the rack end is off. There's the end of the steering rack there. The rack end just threads into the end of the steering rack there. I ended up draining the transmission, dropped it down, filled it again for a second time, ran it through the gears and all that, and I've lifted the car back up, and now that's almost finished draining for the second time. So it's a fair bit cleaner now. So once that finishes draining, I'll put the drain plug back in, pull the pan off, and do the internal filter. Here is the old steering parts versus the new. So here's the old rack end and here's the new one. There's like a ball joint socket in here, which ends up wearing out over time. And when you turn the steering wheel, it ends up knocking in that socket, in that joint. So that's why we're replacing it. I just have to, this little plastic or nylon space or a shim, I just transferred that over off the old one. There's the new nut that locks the tie rod end on, and there's the old versus new tie rod end. And you can actually see that the old boot was actually quite torn, a bit worse than what we actually thought. So just as well, I got a new one to replace it. So we'll go through and get all of that back together, and we'll get this transmission sorted. All right, so I've got the steering wheel back together. That's all finished, just got to put the wheel on. Got the pan off the transmission, got the new filter on there as well. Cleaned up all the mounting surface where the pan sort of seals. Had copious amounts of Celastic on it, so someone's been in there before. Got the transmission panel cleaned out, got the new gasket sitting on there, which is good. There's the old filter in there. I don't normally use Cooper filters. I'm just a big fan of Ryco stuff, but Ryco didn't have a listing for the trans filter on this car, which is why I went with that one. So yeah, all I've got to do now is just put this back on, fill it up with oil, and then that's done, and we'll go on to the next job. All right, transmission's back together. Just got to lower the car down and fill it up. But while I've got the car on the hoist, one thing I want to do is change this engine mount here. I don't know if you can really see up in there, but there's some cracks in it. If I actually get my pry bar in here and lever on it, you might be able to see a bit more. So that's quite perished through the front of the front there. So I want to try and get that mount changed out while I got it up in the air. Alrighty, so I got that mount loose. It's just sitting in there, but yeah, can't really get it out because there's no room. It's hitting the radiator fan that way, and you can't pull it out either side because it's hitting the bracket. So I'm just sort of thinking what's going to be the answer here to get it out. And what I'm thinking is I'm just going to get me red stand there and put it under here. And then I'm going to loosen off the front K-frame bolts and lower this bar down. And hopefully that I'll be able to get the mount out. Give it a go, see what happens. Engine mount's in. There was a little bit of emission. There's the old one there. So now we'll drop it down, we'll fill up the auto, and mechanically that's about as far as I can go today because I'm waiting on parts, but we'll take it down the street to get an alignment done, and then we'll just do a couple of other little things when we get back. Alrighty, transmission's filled, so that's all good. I'm going to take it down the street to get a wheel alignment, but on the way there, I'm just going to go past the car wash and just sort of pressure wash the engine bay while I've got the covers off. There's just like a little bit of just dirtiness and stuff around that I just want to sort of clean up, make it look nice. A little bit of a shame that I couldn't get the right oil filter for it. I would have liked to do an oil filter on it today as well. But yeah, mechanically, that's sort of as far as I can go. Oh, one thing I didn't mention is actually about a month ago, before I made a deal with this guy, the car was really hard to start when cold. It had an issue with the glow plugs. So I have fitted a new set of glow plugs. You can just see it in the middle of the screen there. It's a bit dark back there. But yeah, it's got 4 new glow plugs in it too. But that wasn't part of this video. So anyway, just go give the engine bay a bit of a hose down, and then I'll drop it off for an alignment, and we'll come back and do a couple more things. All right, so we're back, got the alignment done. It wasn't actually that far out after I did that rack end and tie rod end. But anyway, that's all good. I've just chucked it up and put the cover back on underneath it because I did go to the car wash and blast out the engine bay. Just got to put the engine cover back on. When I was at the car wash, I went through the drive-through car wash, and it actually blew off half of the SLX badge on the side, and also one of the letters on the other side. So I'm actually going to just go through and delete them. I don't like badges anyway. And I might, I don't know, see if I can be bothered. I might take off a couple of these badges too. We'll see how we go. All right, they're all cleaned up and removed. I ended up doing the back as well. So I guess this can be classified as one of those free mods I was talking about at the start of the video. So got rid of the CDX badge on both the doors, the Hyundai badge that was there, the i30 badge that was there, and then the CDI diesel badge that was down there. So I just went through with the old fishing line technique behind it, and then a caramel wheel on the double-sided tape behind it, and then just a little bit of a polish. So yeah, that's how that's turned out. Now, next thing I want to do, which is also sort of classified as a little bit of a mod, I guess, the left-hand number plate light's blown and the right-hand reverse light's blown. So I want to replace both the number plate lights and both the reverse lights and change them to LED. So you've seen me do this in previous videos, but I'll just give you a quick rundown of how I'm doing it anyway. All right, so I've pulled the number plate lights down. Just got these little tabs on the side you press in, and then you flick the light down and it comes out. You can see that one's not working. This one is. So you just untwist the base, comes out like that, globe pulls out. All right, I just had to turn the light off to take the old globe out because it was hot. So that one's done. I'm gonna do this one. Oh, doesn't even have a globe in there. That's probably why it's not working. Get our new globe. Set that in there like that. And then you just clip this back on, clip it back into the bumper bar. Boom, they're done. Now we'll do the reverse lights. Right, they're both done. They look good. Nice little upgrade, considering I had those globes here rather than just change it with the standard one. So yeah, happy with that. All right, we'll move on to the next thing. Next up, just gonna do an all-on-all filter change on this thing. I am still waiting on brakes, but yeah, got an oil filter now, so I thought I might as well do that. That's the oil filter housing right there. It's just a cartridge filter. So you just need to unplug this guy and pull that off and move that out of the way. Do not forget to plug that back in. 27 mil, screw that out, and then it's just an insert filter. That's what the filter looks like when it comes out. I mean, it looks like that when it comes out. That's the old filter, obviously. And then there's a new seal for the cap. a new big O-ring, and then there's a little O-ring at the end there. So I've changed both of them, and then that just goes back in. Squeeze it past the top radiator hose. Get it in there. And then tighten that up, and then we'll go underneath and dump the oil. Forget to plug our little sensor back in. Good. All about that linear flow. Perfect. Rightio, that'll do for today. Sort of had enough. I mean, I only started this about lunchtime, and it's 4:30 now, so got a fair bit done in sort of half a day. But yeah, that'll do. In the next few days, or whenever I have some time or whatever, I'll do those back brakes, and I want to give those headlights a bit of a polish too. But yeah, you will see that probably right about now. It's been about a week since we've worked on this thing. I've just got about an hour now between jobs, so I just want to get the thing up and get the back brakes done on it. The back brakes are almost worn down to metal on metal, so we need to do pads in it and discs. I've ordered some discs off eBay, which are sitting up there because they were cheap. And as I've mentioned before in previous videos, I'm a big advocate of if you need to replace something to upgrade it. So as a result, I'm going to change the pads to heavy duty pads. I do like these Bendix heavy duties. So we'll get it up, get it all apart, and yeah, sort of show you how it all happens. All right, so rear disc brake setup on these things. The handbrake is incorporated into the caliper on these. I'm pretty sure. No, I don't think they are actually. That's good. That makes my life easier. Sometimes these run a wind back caliper, but it looks like this is just a pushback. But I'll confirm once that's apart. And I've just got some standard replacement rotors for it as well. You've seen me do brakes multiple times in previous videos, so I'm not going to bore you with it. I'm just going to get into this, blow it apart, put it all back together with the new stuff, bleed up the brakes, and yeah, I'll just show you what it looks like once it's done. All right, so we're all done. A little bit of a surprise. Took the discs out of the box, and these are the ones that I got sent. So yeah, a little bit of a freebie little upgrade there. It's a bit strange that it's got slotted and dimpled rotors with heavy duty pads on the back and completely stock brakes on the front, but hey, it is what it is. It'll work. It'll work just fine. So yeah, I've gone through and bled up all of the brakes. Everything is all flushed and bled through. So I'm just going to bang the wheels back on it now and get on to the last little job on this car. The last thing I want to do to this car is give the headlights a little bit of love. As you can see, they're quite faded and dull. Even the fog lights are just a little bit not as fresh as they used to be. But yeah, especially this headlight's quite bad. So what I do on headlights like this is I use a headlight restoration kit. So you do one kit per side. So you go through and you clean the light first. Then you scrub this thing over it. It's got like a little buffing pad inside. This takes all the yellowing and stuff out of the light. Then you wash it all down, let it dry, and then you go over it with this. This has got like another little pad inside, and you just sort of paint that over the light. And that just sort of brings it back to looking a bit better. Really recommend these kits. I buy them in bulk. I buy a box of about 100 of these things at a time. And yeah, I do use them quite a lot. So I'll go through and do that. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. There we have it, guys. Headlights are all done. Looking a fair bit better than they did before. Fair bit more clear. Did the fog lights as well, so I'm happy with how that turned out. And on that note, this car is officially all done. So yeah, I know it wasn't anything too exciting on this thing, guys, but I do appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. As always, if you like what you see, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video very shortly. Take it easy, be safe.